Welcome to episode 100 of the Toadstool Boardroom for the week of July 30th, 2024. It's a big, fun milestone episode. We're so happy that you're joining us. My name's Logan Plant, and I'm joined, as always, by Justin Corrice. Hey, Justin.
What's up 100 times, Logan?
And Chris Shriver. Hi, Chris.
I love you 1,000, right? Isn't that? That's
3,
how it works, right? 3,000? Whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Is that an MCU reference?
We'll need a few more episodes.
Yeah, a couple
we'll get
more.
There. We'll get there someday. Yeah, we're super excited for episode 100 here in the Boardroom. If you're just joining us, we're a weekly Nintendo show here on Thursdays, video version on YouTube, audio on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Last week, we gave you our Nintendo World Championships NES Edition review, and I think that we all liked it. Maybe more than we thought we would. It's a good time. It was fun, so go check out that episode. Next week, I don't know what we're talking about. We'll see what Nintendo does, but it's sure to be a good time as well. This week, we have a really fun special segment planned to celebrate episode 100. We're going to talk about something that we don't talk about that often on this podcast. We're always talking about the best Nintendo games of all time, Nintendo as a business as they stand now, but I want to talk about some of the all-time creators at Nintendo. We're going to decide on Nintendo's 4 giants. If the museum in Kyoto that's opening this year had a monument to Nintendo's 4 most influential, iconic creators, who would be on it? So we have a list here of a bunch of creators that we want to highlight, and this isn't really like a ranking thing. We're not going to rank these people's accomplishments. It's not super like that. We want to honor all of them. If there's somebody that we left off, feel free to hit us up and let us know who we should be talking about. But kind of my approach to this was, if you are looking to get deeper into Nintendo history as a Nintendo fan, what are the names that you should know? And that's kind of how I approached curating some of this list. So we're going to go through a bunch of names here and talk about who are the 4 giants holding up the moon over Termina, if you will. So, Chris, if you want to get us started by highlighting the first person that we have on this list.
Oh, we're just going straight down.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. Shigeru Miyamoto.
Wow.
Mario's dad
selection
himself, right? What a shock. Been at the company since 1977 to the present day, the year 2024. He joined Nintendo after his dad set up an interview with Hiroshi Yamauchi. He's the guy that is known for creating Mario, creating Zelda, creating Pikmin, which is his new hotness, latest hotness in the last 20 years or so. He's the brainchild behind things like Mario 64, Super Nintendo World, and help, write the Super Mario Brothers movie. He is what most of my childhood is based off of. He is the brainchild of all of those things, and many of the things that we here at the Boardroom love and hold so near and dear to our hearts. The man is in his 70s now, which is crazy to think about. We talk about a lot about like how they're going to pass that torch. I was thinking about this morning. Like, I feel like he is one of those people, like, I don't know that you'll ever really be able to replace him necessarily. Like, Nintendo has a really good track record of finding people that, or rather grooming people like for the next generation of Nintendo leadership. He's one that's just like, he's a creative, like, much like Jim Henson. Like, he grew up in a bit of like a rural kind of area. Zelda's kind of based on him. I feel like anybody listening to the show knows this story, but like based on him, like exploring the local caves, like around the area that he lived and like pretending to go on adventures. And I feel like it's kind of like a dying type of lifestyle in 2024, depending on where you live, or less of those places kind of exist now. At least it seems that way. He's one of a kind.
Yeah, and so you pointed out that he's in his 70s, and when we were putting together this list of people, I noticed something kind of wild, which is that with the exceptions of those who are no longer with us, everybody on this list still works at Nintendo. Literally all of them. Everybody we're going to talk about is still there and has been there since for over like 25 or 30 years. And that is something really interesting, I think, is that as we approach this next generation of Nintendo hardware, this could be the final generation that a lot of these iconic creators are still working at Nintendo. And I think that that is a really bittersweet thing, because it could be the big grand finale for a lot of these creatives, and then passing the torch on to the next generation, and we don't really know what that looks like yet. And Miyamoto is in his 70s. I don't think he has any intention of stopping what he's doing now with the theme parks and the movies. He's going to be at Nintendo probably for the rest of his life, but it is interesting to think about that we could approach this point where some of these guys start to retire and Nintendo starts to look a little bit different. But Justin, what do you want to say about Miyamoto here?
I mean, I think that Miyamoto is, I think, far and away the most important figure in the history of the industry. I think that the things that he has created are the backbone of video games. And to piggyback on what Chris was saying, the idea that you can do a lot of succession planning and prepare the next generation for a lot of things is absolutely true. But at the same time, there is a certain level of just imagination and creativity that isn't so easily passed on and taught. And I'm hopeful that the things that he has built are able to continue to have that same imagination and whimsy and wonder and creativity, once he is no longer so active in the development of everything. Frankly, by the time I'm his age, I hope I am long retired.
Yes. Yeah, I know. I don't know how people have the drive to continue working that long, but they do, and it's really.
I mean, if you love what you do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he absolutely does. And yeah, he stepped away from being as hands-on with games a long time ago, and I was starting to wonder, is Miyamoto on the way out? But no, instead he's been the flagship leader of their expansion into entertainment, like we talked about with Super Nintendo World. He's the one that popped out of the warp pipe when they were showing off the park on video for the first time. He was definitely at the forefront of the Super Mario Brothers movie. He is pushing the company into new frontiers, and that's really, really cool, because that's what he did at the start when he made Donkey Kong. That was huge. And yeah, it's just crazy how long Miyamoto and a lot of these other guys have been there. Next one I want to bring up is this. I learned a lot about this man prepping for this show, and it's really extremely fascinating. Some things I'm surprised that I did not know until now. So hopefully if you're listening, you don't know all of this. I'm hoping some people out there are going to be learning some things for the first time. I imagine. I can't be the only one. So this is Gunpei Yokoi, who worked at Nintendo from 1965, so well before they were an electronics company, through 1996. And Yokoi was originally working on the assembly line for the Hanafuda cards when Nintendo was still primarily a card-playing company in Japan. And he was just messing around, and he made the Ultra Hand, which, no, not from Tears of the Kingdom, but what it's named after in Tears of the Kingdom, the Ultra Hand like extendo grabber toy, which became Nintendo's first major successful toy. And Hiroshi Yamauchi, who we're going to talk more about in a little bit, came in and saw Yokoi toying around with this, and Yokoi thought he was going to get punished and yelled at because he was goofing around on the job. And Yamauchi is like notoriously a very, very strict man. He fired people left and right. Like, if you didn't agree with him, he was very hard-nosed. And instead, he loved what he saw, and they produced that toy for the holiday season, and that's what entered Nintendo into the toy-making business. And Yokoi would go on to develop all of Nintendo's other toys that they made, like the Love Tester and some of the other ones, before they eventually got into the Game & Watch, which the legend says that Yokoi had the idea for Game & Watch, seeing bored businessmen on the train playing with their calculators on the way to work. And I think one of the coolest things that I learned about Yokoi is these quotes I'm about to read about Nintendo's philosophy from the very beginning, which, if you read it, it's still what they are today. And it says, this is a quote: "The Nintendo way of adapting technology is not to look for the state of the art, but to utilize mature technology that can be mass-produced cheaply." That's still what they do. It has been what they've done for over 50 years at this point. And that's just crazy to me that this philosophy was put in place by Yokoi, who mentored Miyamoto, who helped Miyamoto on the development of Donkey Kong, who designed the Game Boy and Rob, who worked on Metroid and Metroid 2, Kid Icarus, Fire Emblem. Like, this guy is at the heart of Nintendo's philosophy to this very day. And unfortunately, he left Nintendo in 1996, and then just a year later he passed in a car accident, so he's no longer with us. But his influence on Nintendo can't be overstated. And yeah, there's just, if you haven't looked into Yokoi's impact on Nintendo, you should go, and do that, because there's a lot more to learn about than just this, Chris.
If you're into like engineering at all and just like the practice of like being an engineer, like the man was an absolute genius. Especially like if you get into, how he designed the Game Boy and like some of those early sketches and things like that. There's a lot of really cool stuff out there on the internet about how all that came about. I mean, he's one like because that's like how my mind works to some extent. Like when I think of like my favorite people that have ever been at Nintendo, like he's probably number 3. It's like Miyamoto, Iwata, and him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good pick. I think we're talking about the 4 giants. I think we already have 2 of them in the first 2 people that we've talked about here. Justin, what do you think here?
Yeah, I think one of the tragedies of the industry is that the name Gunpei Yokoi has faded over time, particularly since his passing. If you are a little bit older and you were like really active in the 90s and you knew a lot of these names, like this name was every bit as big as like Miyamoto. He was a legendary creator. I mean, you have to understand that like what a big deal things like the Game Boy were, how important things like Metroid were. He is a giant in the industry, and I think that it is well deserved that we mention him. Frankly, I wish that people would talk about him more. And it's funny, while you were talking about it, a thought just occurred to me. Is he like low-key the real creator of ARMS?
Because of the Ultra Hand? That's so good.
Yeah.
That's great.
Thought.
Yeah, that's nice.
But yeah, so like I've mentioned him on the show before. I know that both of you have as well. He's a name that I hope we continue to mention, because I think that his legacy is so important and so big and so massive, and it's not, I think, understood enough. And so like the more we can get the word out about him, I think is worthwhile.
Yeah, if you read early stories about Nintendo as they were making this transition into electronics, you will consistently hear about 3 guys. Yamauchi, who was president of Nintendo at the time, Yokoi, who was working with him on the card business before moving into toys and electronics, and then Miyamoto, this protege that they brought in that started making video games for them. And yeah, it's like those 3 guys are just foundational, and I feel like Miyamoto he's the one that people talk about, and rightfully so, right? We just talked about him. He's a legend. We didn't talk about him that long because I just feel like everybody kind of knows who he is and what he's done. But yeah, history, I think, tends to remember fewer people than it deserves to. And so, yeah, I think this is a really important one to talk about.
If you have seen the Tetris movie, or if you haven't, there's a scene in there, the one with Taron Egerton, where like they show him the Game Boy for the first time, and he's like one of the first people to like ever witness it, and like the guy showing it to him is him. It's supposed to be Yokoi.
Oh, that's
it's not
cool.
him, but it's like an actor portraying him. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I didn't know he was in it because I knew Yamauchi was in the movie. I did not know that Yokoi.
I'm pretty sure it's him. Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's definitely dramatized, but
for sure,
it's fun. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Justin, you want to tell us about the next person on our list here?
Yeah, and we've already mentioned him, Hiroshi Yamauchi, the long time president of Nintendo. Extremely fascinating life, actually. So he was the president of Nintendo up until a decade or so ago, which means that, and he started as there in the 1940s. So he absolutely preceded the video game version of Nintendo by a lot. A significant amount of his career actually was back in the old Hanafuda card and toy maker days. And it's really interesting, actually. So Nintendo was a family company, and he took over as the president of Nintendo in his 20s and served in that capacity until like 2010,
2002.
Okay. I might be conflating with when he passed away, which I think was 2013.
Yeah, that's right.
And so everything that Nintendo is today happened under his guidance. It was like he is the architect behind all of these things. And like Logan alluded to, he had a reputation of being a very, very harsh businessman, a very exacting, and was not afraid to let people go and move on. But at the same time, he did create an environment where people like Gunpei Yokoi, where people like Miyamoto could flourish and could have the room to be creative and do unusual things. It's an interesting juxtaposition to have somebody who is so long entrenched as strictly a business person and run this company and have such a reputation for being so direct challenge the status quo as much as Nintendo has and reinvent itself as much as Nintendo has. And so utterly fascinating guy. He was literally in law school when he left to take over as president of Nintendo. He also, this is important to, I think, Logan and I in particular. He is why we still have the Seattle Mariners in Seattle. The MLB team was they were getting ready to load up moving trucks to move the team. They didn't have a local owner or buyer, and because the Seattle area had been the home of Nintendo of America and had been such a welcoming home to him, Yamauchi is why Nintendo stepped in and purchased the team, not because he had any particular love of baseball, but specifically as a thank you to the Pacific Northwest, the city of Seattle, the extended Seattle area, in order to keep them in as a way of showing gratitude, which is just frankly, a mind-blowing thing to me for a business leader to do, something of that size and scale. So he's, if Gunpei Yokoi and Miyamoto are the people who were out there, like in the trenches, like building the Nintendo that we know today. This is the kingpin. This is the dude who is running that show, and this is the boss for that entire thing. And none of this happens without his say so and without his push.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I want to leave some of the links to a bunch of the sources that we looked at for some of the show in the description of this episode, so you can check that stuff out for yourself, and we can credit where we got a lot of this information from. But one of the more interesting things that I read is that Yamauchi, when Nintendo was still, this is in the 60s, when they're still a playing card company, he visited America to visit the largest producer of playing cards in the world to see what it was like, and he was so unimpressed by the size and scale of what was supposedly the most impressive business in his industry that he went back to Japan and said, we need to do something else. This can't be, there's not that much room for growth here. I've seen the ceiling of what this is, and that is kind of like the instigator, with many other factors surely, of what led Nintendo down the road of toys and then electronics and then video games. And that's just such a cool story.
Right before that, didn't he visit Walt Disney and then got the rights to print Disney Hanafuna cards in Japan, right. With Mickey Mouse on them? I think it was like a partnership to they built Disney Japan, and then to promote it, they partnered with Nintendo to print all these cards. There's pictures of them online. But it's a weird partnership from all the way back when.
Yeah. I wonder how much it costs to track one of those down nowadays. That's probably a really, really rare item, if there's any still out there that exist. Yeah, Chris, anything you want to say about Yamauchi?
He's also in the Tetris movie. He's a pretty prominent figure in that movie.
Yeah, he'd have to
be. But even there, they show him trying to get the rights to Tetris to be able to distribute in other markets, and sell it to Nintendo. He's a tough cookie in that movie. Just like he is in real life.
Yeah, there's so much interesting stuff to learn that is out there about Nintendo, and then how they were set up when they started video game development on the NES, and how they were split into R&D 1 and R&D 2, and they were kind of told to compete with each other, and hey, you need to outdo each other, and that was what led to the innovation that we saw coming out of those studios at the time. And there's been many mergers and restructures in the decades and decades since, but it's still kind of that same setup. There's 6 internal teams at EPD, and they're all working on their own things and trying to innovate and outclass each other. And that's a really cool setup, I think, for what is, at the end of the day, it's a business, but it's a very creative one. And I just think that's a really cool concept that Yamauchi and a few others kind of instigated. But Chris, the next one on the list, I wanted you to talk about specifically because of your love for music.
Oh, Koji Kondo.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, he's probably Nintendo's most influential composer that's ever existed. So after graduating in 1984, he found Nintendo hiring on a job board just randomly. Imagine any music studio or music student doing that and just nailing it on the first day of the audition. And then just being there ever since. It's kind of nuts that, he landed that first job and it was just the perfect fit. He's responsible for the score for Super Mario Brothers and The Legend of Zelda. He's also composed music for the Super Mario Brothers movie, which I forgot until I actually pulled out that LP the other day to show James, and his
Nice.
name's on the cover.
That's cool.
Yeah, he's also known for Punch Out.
And he's still making music for Mario and Zelda, which is just crazy.
I mean,
like, yeah.
And it's not like they're growing stale. Like, I feel like every single soundtrack is either an evolution of what was done before, or it's a whole new take on what has happened. Like, Mario Galaxy is still one of the greatest like video game soundtracks ever made. I mean, like, the list goes on for me.
Super Mario Odyssey.
What was the one?
That soundtrack is so
Super
good.
Mario Odyssey is insane. Super Bell Hill from Mario 3D World.
Yeah.
Any Zelda song ever, like
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
pretty much, like, they're all incredible. No, I mean, he's responsible for that feeling that you get when you are going through Spotify and somebody does a cover of the title screen from Ocarina of Time and you get chills. Like, that man is responsible for giving you that feeling. And you should be very grateful. I know I am.
Yeah, and I don't like. It's crazy. He wrote, you could argue, the two most iconic pieces of video game music ever, in the main Zelda theme and the main Mario theme. Like, you could challenge me on maybe Zelda, but Mario, absolutely not. Like, World 1, Super Mario Brothers, I don't think there's a video game tune that more people in the world would recognize than that one. And it's still catchy to this day, and you can play that game still, and you don't get tired of the music. And that is a really impressive thing that he did, and just the identity of those franchises, and Mario and Zelda, right? Those are the two big pillars of Nintendo, obviously. And the fact that 40 years later, he's still making music for these series, and it's still fresh and still awesome. Like, the Tears of the Kingdom soundtrack is incredibly impressive. There is a YouTube series out there that maybe I'll track down the link and throw it in there too, but this person is basically making note of every motif that is a callback to a different moment in the Zelda series. And there's the obvious ones, like the Colgera battle, which is a callback to Dragon Roost Island from Wind Waker because of the whole Rito connection. But there's dozens and dozens of little tiny connections within this soundtrack that don't feel like cheap callbacks, but feel like really intentional references to this series that he's been with the entire time. And I just think that's incredibly cool.
There's also, like, you need to respect the technical aspect of, like, what him and any video game composer back in the 80s and before, like, a recorded orchestral sound could be. Like, they were doing it off of sound chips on a computer. Yeah. You know, they would play the music, like, in studio and then have to convert that into code, basically, to make the sound work the way that they needed it to work. You know, he was obviously intimately involved with that process. There's a really good, it's not him, but there's a really good interview out there with Suzuki and Tanaka, who did the Mother soundtrack. I think the documentary is called Earth to Mother, or maybe it's Mother Earth, something like that. But they talk about the process of, like, how they actually record music. It's recorded music in at least the Super Nintendo era. And when you realize how involved it actually is, it's like, how did you guys even figure this out? Like, it's just a whole other, like, now it's just cool, open Premiere, or not Premiere, whatever the Apple one is, for Pro Tools, you know, and do it in there. You know, it's just a whole other world, way of thinking about it.
Yeah. It's just a miracle that they were able to make video games at all with what they were working with.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah, Justin, what do you think?
Still is. Yeah, I think that for my money, this is the greatest composer the industry has ever seen. I think that the fact that his stuff is, if he writes something today, it's incredible. He wrote something in the 80s, it's incredible. And to your point about the way that they had to do it, like, imagine, you know, from a technical standpoint, this dude was making the musical Mona Lisa back in the 80s using, like, those giant ultra-fat Sharpies, one dot at a time. Like, that's effectively what they had to do to make music. And not only did they make functional music, but it's gorgeous and memorable. And I think something that is really spectacular about his music that influence a lot of what you see throughout the entire industry is his music always tends to have so much character. You can play a track from Zelda and you know where that track takes place, right? You know, if you are in like Death Mountain, you know, if you're in the open fields, you know if you are riding a horse through the desert. And I think that is spectacular, especially when you realize what they had to do so early to pull that off. And like early in his career, like there weren't any collaborators. Like Ocarina of Time had one composer. That entire game was one guy. And on top of it, like, especially these early days, you're wearing multiple hats. Like, he's known as a composer, but he was also creating all the sound effects for, like, these NES games. Like, go back and play something like Star Fox. And, like, I know you're not the biggest Star Fox fan in the world, but I adore the sound design in the original Star Fox games. Everything from the blast to the collision sound effects to the little chirps you get from your, like, squadron and stuff. Like, he's doing all of these things. This is a multifaceted genius. And the fact that, like, he just answered like one ad for one job, and somehow they locked in the perfect person for Nintendo and the perfect role for him forever. Incredible.
Yeah,
if that's not fate, like, I don't know what is.
Right?
Yeah, it's the only job he interviewed for out of college was the one he still has today. It's and decades have passed. It's
Incredible.
Unbelievable. It's
Incredible.
Just the roster of people they assembled and how they have continued to innovate and grow over the years. It's just unreal, and I think it's one of the reasons that they're just the best. And my favorite and so special is that other studios can't claim this. They just can't. Like, studios, people, talent turnover all the time. Nintendo, you're there, you're pretty much there for life. And that is so cool. And it just makes everything they do feel so rich. Like Super Mario Brothers Wonder, Miyamoto didn't create that game, but it's a Mario game. It's a Nintendo game. It has the DNA of all these people and the fresh ideas of all these new people. And it's so cool. And so few creative outlets can claim that. And that's just amazing. And yeah, Koji Kondo's great. I also wanted to shout out Kazumi Totaka, who is another lifelong composer at Nintendo, and I wanted to give a shout out to Totaka's Song, which you probably know about, but some of you might not. And it's just a really short jingle that is tucked away in the soundtracks of dozens of Nintendo games. It started on the Game Boy with the game X. I don't even really know what that game is. It was first noticed in Mario Paint, but it's in so many games. Also, KK Slider is kind of named after Totaka in Japanese, which is very, very cool. So another iconic composer that we won't spend as much time on, but just wanted to shout him out as well. Next up on our list here it's Satoru Iwata, who you all know obviously very well. He was at HAL from 1980 to 1999, and then he was president of Nintendo from 2000 to 2015 when he passed away 9 years ago this month, which, yeah, it's crazy that 9 years have already passed since that. And he was Nintendo's fourth president, and I think the really remarkable thing is he's the first president outside of the Yamauchi family. When Hiroshi Yamauchi passed it on to him, he was this very young programmer with long hair that was covering his eyes, just a very different look than the buttoned-up, fierce Yamauchi who had been running Nintendo with an iron grip for the last 50 years. Just very, very different, and what an outstanding decision. What Yamauchi saw in him and then what Iwata did after he was handed the reins of the company. But even before that, Iwata was a programmer at HAL, and he helped work on Earthbound. Like, there's the story is basically that he saved Earthbound's development on Super Nintendo. He helped out with games like Pokemon Stadium, where he legendarily ported Pokemon's battle system from the Game Boy to the Nintendo 64 in the span of 1 week. He just came in and did it in 1 week. He's just this genius who came in and did these things in his way, and then he also completely pushed the company in a new direction as its president. He led them during the Wii and DS era, which up until now was Nintendo's most successful era by far. They just took over the world with their Blue Ocean strategy, going to part of the industry that nobody else was tackling, the casual market, and then just absolutely dominating it. And then in the times where things weren't as great, in the Wii U and the 3DS era, he famously halved his salary twice during the Wii U era to prevent layoffs. And this quote I just think is so incredibly relevant especially with how many layoffs we see in the industry right now, where Iwata said, if we reduce the number of employees for better short-term financial results, employee morale will decrease. And I sincerely doubt employees who fear that they may be laid off will be able to develop software titles that could impress people around the world. Like, yes, the man, he just got it. He understood the assignment fully, even at the highs and at the lows. And then something else that he did, which I think is really worth mentioning, is the Nintendo Direct. When Nintendo was the first to realize, hey, this $1 million stage show model isn't the future, and everyone thought they were crazy. People thought this was another sign, another nail in the coffin of Nintendo during the lowest point of their history. And now look around. It's what everybody does, and still to this day, nobody does it as well as them. And that was Iwata hosted those. There's an iconic photo of him holding the banana in one of the first Nintendo Directs ever. He was just such a charming presenter, and yeah, he's a legend. For my money, he's the fourth person of our four giants. We've already named the first three, I think, and then I think it has to go to Iwata. Justin, what do you think?
I think that the really special thing about Iwata is that he was the bridge, I think, between Nintendo as a company and between the players. For a lot of time, people, you were fans of Nintendo and sort of conceptually and the characters and things that they did, but it wasn't really until he took over that the head of the company became the face of the company, and that players had this relationship with him in a way that just didn't exist with Yamauchi. And things like the Direct. Like, yes, the Direct is great because it's a honestly relatively inexpensive way for them to deliver content, but it really is meant to be a direct conversation between Nintendo as a company and its fans and player base. Like, this is basically a theme that you see in his tenure as a leader there, was that he was the architect of bringing players and Nintendo itself together. I think the things that we see recently, like things like theme parks, things like Nintendo Live, I honestly believe that those are his legacy, that we're seeing that extend further and further. Yeah. And I think that the fact that he was so charismatic and the fact that he was so likable was a big part of why that was so successful. But I also think that it was really genuine. The gestures that you mentioned, like the way that, famously taking the pay cut and things like that, things that you don't have to do. And honestly, truthfully, in the grand scheme of things, for companies of this size, like, that's not the difference between them being able to make payroll or not. But like, as a gesture, right? As somebody who is like putting themselves out there and on the line, I think that the power of that is really hard to overstate. Iwata is a legend.
Yeah, and there were times where I remember in the Wii U era, his approval rating from the shareholders was at like record lows, just because of what was happening to Nintendo, but they continued to stick with him. They did not change course, and yeah, it's just, I think, a testament to everything he had built to that point. And yeah, the Switch is absolutely like Iwata's one of the final things he worked on, guaranteed. The Wii U was that half step there, and we wouldn't have the Switch without him. And yeah, the Wii U was a misstep, but it was an important one.
I also love that he never stopped being like a game designer really at heart, and just the idea that there would be times where like literally the president of the company would step in and roll up his sleeves and get in there and start messing with the builds to like get them across the finish line or polish things up. It's a really it is like the CEO jumping on the assembly line in the factory basically, and he would not shy about it. Honestly, I probably relished it. It seems so in keeping with like what we understand of his personality.
Yeah, I think he's somebody that held on to being as hands-on development as long as he could until some of the jobs and responsibilities of being president took over. And he didn't make a lot of public appearances in the early days of his presidency, and then that kind of shifted over time. But Chris, what do you want to say about Iwata here?
No, I mean, on that, like, in my own experiences, like, having that boss that is willing to get into the weeds and has the experience to get into the weeds the way that he did, like, that's just it's so good for morale. And I think you see that like throughout Nintendo, during his era. And I think it's why so many people probably stuck with them, because it was like, well, we're behind this guy. The fact that he like he's the reason they really started to pull back the curtain and like Iwata asks and like here's our development process.
So cool.
Like we didn't know a lot of that stuff for a really long time until they started posting it on Nintendo's website of like, oh yeah, in A Link Between Worlds, everything is slightly leaned back so that it actually looks normal. But like if you put the character models like upright, everything just looks shifted. Like we wouldn't have known that any other way. But like they started to share those type of like industry, I'll say industry secrets like that, which I really appreciate. Yeah. I do want to give a shout out to there's an Ask Iwata book that has a lot of fascinating stories that it really speaks to his character and how what he thought about leadership, and it goes from the early days of his career and like how he would solve problems, and then all the way to like how he would treat people within the organization and how you should treat people within an organization in order to like band together and get the best product that you can, which you know, like we were saying earlier, like I think is kind of a lost art these days. He really did perfect it. Also, shout out to him for fitting the Kanto region in Pokemon Gold and Silver, because like he was the guy that like figured that out.
So incredibly awesome. Yeah, just really, really cool stuff. He's easily like the most influential Nintendo person of this century, like, hands down. He is the person who left the biggest mark, and kind of like what Justin was saying about their pushes into entertainment, like the way we see Nintendo operate is largely his vision still to this day, and probably always will be. And that's just super special and really awesome. Yeah, Iwata Asks is so cool. The president of the company just sitting down with the developers of these games and having to laugh at any joke he makes. I always remember that from Iwata Asks. It would be like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And then Iwata makes some little joke, and then it says, everyone in room laughs. It's like, yeah, because the president of your company is in the room. Of course you're going to laugh at whatever joke he tells. Like, it's just super great. Yeah, he was just the best and awesome personality, and I still miss him. I still miss him in Nintendo Directs and just at Nintendo in general. But we should move on to our next creator. Justin, who do we got?
Ooh, up next we have Takashi Tezuka, which I am so glad we have this name on the list, because I think everybody that we've mentioned so far, there's a real good chance that you probably know these people. This is a name that you should know.
Yes.
Basically everything that we've said about Miyamoto more or less applies to Takashi Tezuka. He has worked from the beginning on every key Nintendo franchise. Like he's the one who actually wrote The Legend of Zelda, and he's been integral to that series ever since. Same goes for Super Mario Brothers. He was the director of what I consider one of the greatest games of all time, The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. If you like, it almost reminds me of if you go to the IMDb page of an incredible character actor and you look at their credits and that list is like 10 times longer than you were expecting.
Yes.
That is Takashi Tezuka. He has worked on everything. He co-created Yoshi. He's done Luigi's Mansion, Animal Crossing, Pikmin. Run down the list. And he's had a central role the entire way. He is in a lot of ways, you know, if Miyamoto has been sort of the front-facing face of a lot of these projects, he's the person who has been behind him every step of the way on every one of these. And he's still at the company now, 40 plus years later. And we talk about that longevity and that the way that basically the people who are central to the DNA of Nintendo continue to be what helps steer its course. That is very much this guy. And I think that again, if you ever want to see just the longest list of credits of all time, Google them. It's unimaginably impressive. I had and again, it's all over the world. Like basically everything Yoshi, everything Pikmin, everything Mario, everything Yoshi, everything Zelda, things like Mario Run, things like DS games, Link's crossbow training.
Woo!
I love that game. That's the game that brought Chris and me together. Is Link's crossbow.
That's right.
Yeah. No, it's like I think on this list, some people that we haven't gotten to yet are like Mr. Zelda, like Eiji Aonuma. He is Zelda through and through, or Sakurai is Kirby and Smash Brothers through and through. But like you're saying, Justin, Tezuka has everything. He's just Mr. Nintendo.
If there is a connective tissue between all of these properties, there's a very good chance it's him.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. He's been at Nintendo since 1984, so a little later than some of those really early guys we were talking about, but still basically since the beginning. And yeah, what I really like is producer credits for things like Luigi's Mansion, Pikmin, Animal Crossing, these like not, I don't want to say B tier, that sounds reductive to me, but they're not the big flagship Super Mario or Zelda titles, but they're huge series for Nintendo that he's just been an enormous part of forever. And he's still making public appearances. He was at the GDC panel they did for Super Mario Brothers Wonder, and he's the one that told us things like, oh, we had everybody write down their ideas for Wonder Flowers on sticky notes, and anyone in the company could do it. Like, he told those stories. And the video game industry, and Nintendo specifically at this point, like, movies have been around for over 100 years at this point, right? Music's been around forever. Like, video games, this is one of the only mediums where its founding members are still active, and it's everyone on this list. And Tezuka, I think, is another really underrated part of that.
Yeah, some of the stories you hear about going all the way back to The Legend of Zelda, people who were there at the time talk about literally Tezuka and Miyamoto sitting side by side and drawing the world together. Like, it's so integral to all of that. It's fascinating. He's a very interesting guy.
Yeah. Chris?
Great glasses on this man now. No, I mean, he's got style. No, I mean, it's very, and you'll see it, like, or at least I've seen it throughout my career, like, the people that are, not like I wouldn't call him a backup singer, but like, he's that supporting voice that you do need. Like, he's that person that just like brings out even more out of like your Miyamoto's, like your front man. And it really just helps the whole group shine as a whole. Anybody that can provide like that little extra spice to what it is that's being created, you want those people in your court. And I mean, I think it's clear as day that he, provided that for the company. Also directed A Link in the Past. Like, are you kidding me? Let's go.
Come on. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, we have 6 more names to get through. We're talking about these guys a lot. They deserve it. It's awesome. This is super fun, but we should pick it up just a little bit. Chris is our next person on the list.
Masahiro Sakurai, our favorite YouTuber.
Yeah, he's so great at it. Yeah,
he's so good at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's the creator of Kirby, creator of Smash Brothers, and directed Kid Icarus Uprising and Meteos. Honestly, my biggest thing with him is he's like the Apple of Nintendo people. Like, he's all about refinement. He doesn't have this wide breadth.
That is
of
such a good analogy. That's really
thank you.
Really good. Yeah.
Thank you. He doesn't have this like super wide breadth of like. He's basically the opposite of Tezuka, like of different IP. But the IPs that he's with, he's like, no, I know everything that there is to know about this, and like I've shaped this to my own liking, and we've made improvements over the years, and like listen to the player base, and improved those games over time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can even see that like in his YouTube series. Like, he's just a very calculated, put together individual. He knows exactly what he wants. Like he is in charge of making tons of decisions throughout the Smash Brothers development process, and he talks about that in one of his videos. And yeah, I mean, he's wildly intelligent, incredibly influential, and has a sick video game collection.
Yes. Yeah, Sakurai he's my favorite. I just love any time we get to hear this guy talk, which is why I love his YouTube series so much, because if I could pick anyone to do what he's doing on YouTube, I'd pick him. He just has such a detailed, eloquent way of explaining exactly how he thinks about things. And I don't think there's a bigger perfectionist at Nintendo. And he's not even really at Nintendo, right? He's at his own company, Sora. He is a contractor for Nintendo. Yep. He does not work there.
Yeah.
He never has. He worked at HAL first from 1990 to 2003.
Exactly what I was going to mention.
Sora ever since. Yeah, he's never been a Nintendo employee, which is crazy because he's just so synonymous with it. But he is such a perfectionist. And he really knows, like Chris was saying, exactly how he wants to do things. And you look at his games, and you can... Nobody has a bigger stamp, I think, on a game at Nintendo than Sakurai. You can tell when it's a Sakurai video game. From how he lays out his main menus with the big, colorful icons. Every Sakurai game has that, from Smash Brothers to Kirby Air Ride to Kid Icarus. They all look like that. Or the big challenge boards, which are like a 10x10 grid of achievements to do. Sakurai does that. Nobody else at Nintendo does that. He's like... I feel like the closest is like Kojima, like just in this category of he is an auteur that does things his way and nobody's going to tell him no because he's a genius and he thinks about things in such a unique way. And I really am excited that he's wrapping up YouTube and getting on his next game, and I can't wait to see what it is.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because that's exactly what I was thinking. Is in Nintendo's history, it is so remarkable that he's so important to it and does not work for them. He did work for Iwata at one point, because Iwata used to run HAL Laboratories, and they have some overlap there. But he is that auteur. To me, he's in that same category as your Kojimas, as your Suda51s, as your Hideki Kamiyas. Like, there are people who make video games, and there are people who almost express themselves in video games, and he's very much that category. You can see his fingerprints all over the projects that he does, and it's wholly remarkable. And truthfully, that is something that Nintendo historically doesn't necessarily like to lean into a whole lot. You know, even now, like we talk about how it's hard to find out which team is even developing a game nowadays. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they have so much regard for him, that, you know, again, has never worked for Nintendo, but makes freaking Smash Brothers. Yes. Right? Yeah. It's like, yeah, you can have the keys to everything. Go for it. Have fun. And it's a level of trust that I think is really well earned, and I think that the degree to which he puts himself into his projects, for better or worse, is a big part of why they turn out the way that they do. And again, he is one of those dudes where, like, a lot of game creators aren't necessarily like the best players. I'll bet he would kick my butt in Smash.
Oh yeah, he could play 2 characters against you at one time with one hand on each controller. We've seen him do that in his videos.
Just get bodied. Yeah.
Even in his videos when he's presenting a new character, just the detail that he goes to is just crazy. There's no one else that could make Smash Brothers because of everything that has to go into that game every time they add a character.
And can I just point out that he's just cool as hell.
He is so cool.
He has great style.
So cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is, I think, the only person on this list I've ever seen in person. Which, I saw him on stage at a Smash tournament at E3 in 2017. Or 2018, when they had announced Ultimate, and that was King. Such a cool moment to see him in the flesh. It was awesome. And he's like, I saw some things in that build I didn't really like. I'm going to the airport right now to fly back to Japan to fix what I just saw. That's the one thing he said to us on
Certified
stage.
sicko.
Yeah, that's the most on-brand thing that I've ever heard. Yeah, he's so cool. Okay, next up is Shinya Takahashi, who... he's presenting the Nintendo Directs right now. He is the main guy, along with Koizumi, who we'll talk about in a bit. They're the 2 kind of leaders right now of Nintendo's first party at EPD, their entertainment planning and development. So they're the 2 frontrunners right now. But Takahashi, just like everyone else on this list, he's been at Nintendo since 1989. So he's been there forever and is still there today. And he is credited on basically every first-party game since 2010 as a general producer. So he's one of those top 4 names in the credits because he's just an overseer of every team they have. If it's Splatoon, if it's Pikmin, Zelda, Mario, Animal Crossing, whatever, he has his hands in it, and that's cool. So we've been talking a lot about kind of historical people and what they did in the 90s. And Takahashi right now, he's overseeing everything right now, and then he hosts the Nintendo Directs and presents it all to us. So yeah, he's somebody I feel like people don't really talk about, but he's a big name at Nintendo in the present day, and I think that's really cool.
I think in a lot of ways he's the face of the company now. He's taken over that role that Iwata established, and because of how important that connection between Nintendo and the community has become, it's an essential role. And I think that sometimes we're so used to PR that it's really easy to see those people as, okay, well, here's like a, the PR person. Like, no, this like, we are literally seeing one of the people who is central to creating everything they create nowadays, who is also willing to put themselves out there and be the face for that and communicate directly to the audience. And I think that is really excellent.
Mm-hmm. Chris, anything on Takahashi here?
Just really interesting to go all the way back to like the beginning of his career. He holds a lot of different positions, which is cool. So like he has that experience, just in a lot of like different seats at the company, and a lot of different parts of the development process. I don't know that many people in the industry can say that necessarily. Usually it's like, I'm a VFX artist, and like that's it. You know, and I think that is what kind of rounded him out to become the producer that he is today. Which you know, it's not an easy thing to do. As someone who changes jobs like every 6 months at my job, it's not an easy thing to do. I'll say that.
Yeah.
So a lot of respect there.
Yeah. And then I'll actually just jump to my next one now, because I think that these two really go hand in hand, and that's Yoshiaki Koizumi, who has been at Nintendo since 1991, and he is also a general manager at EPD, and he's the general producer of Nintendo Switch. So he had a big hand in what went into that console, the design of the hardware itself, and then how it was all rolled out to us. So outstanding work there. And he was one of Miyamoto's hires. He was like a protege of Miyamoto back in the day, which is very, very cool. He wrote the scenario for Majora's Mask. Very dark, very twisted. One of the darkest things they've ever put out. And he's the one that wrote it. And on the other side, he's Mr. Mario kind of for the 3D era. He directed Mario Sunshine, Mario Galaxy, and he's still a producer on 3D Mario, like Super Mario Odyssey. And so that's a really weird kind of two sides of the coin, with Mario on one side and then Majora's Mask on the other. And then he's the other guy you see hosting Nintendo Directs these days. So it's him and it's Takahashi. And he's had his hands in everything. He had his hands in Ocarina of Time. And my favorite story that I read about Koizumi was that he was trying to figure out, how are we going to make combat work against multiple enemies in 3D? So he went to a stage play that was reenacting a samurai battle, and he just saw that in this sword battle, not every enemy was attacking at once. It was a one-on-one duel as other enemies waited their turn, and then they took what they saw at that play and made it into Ocarina of Time's combat system. That's pretty much every video game ever now, is everyone else just waits while one person attacks you. So I thought that was just a cool story. I love that a lot of people at Nintendo are gamers, but a lot of them aren't. And just seeing where do they get their inspiration for what they put into their games. And yeah, I went to a play and watched this samurai fight scene, and then we made that into Ocarina of Time. That's just such a cool story. And there's stories like that all over Nintendo, like even Miyamoto exploring the caves or gardening, inspiring Pikmin, just really cool stuff. So yeah, Koizumi's a huge person at Nintendo again in the present day. But again, he's been there over 30 years. So yeah, him and Takahashi are really kind of the two creative leaders as a whole. As people like Sakurai or Aonuma are working on one specific thing, these guys have their hands in everything. Which is cool. Should we move on to the next one to get through some of these guys? Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Justin, who do you have next for us?
Oh, up next we got one of my heroes, Eiji Aonuma. My goodness. So Aonuma, been with the company since 1988, which is something that we see is really common. He did not have a video game background before that. He basically learned on the job to do it. He comes from a family of carpenters, believe it or not. You can actually go online and see some pictures of some like really intricate and fascinating woodwork that he's created earlier in his life, which I feel like we see today in like Tears of the Kingdom, that like craft portion of his brain. You know, he credits a lot of his interest in the Zelda games in falling in love with A Link to the Past, which is an early favorite of mine. So he's somebody that I look to as somebody who has a lot of like really similar tastes to mine, which I appreciate. And I think that you know, when he took over the Legend of Zelda franchise, starting with so he directed Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, on and on and on and on. And he's this really fascinating guy to me, because when I look at what he has done in his career and where they're at today, you know, we talk about a lot of these people on this list preceding this, and a lot of their legacy is, here's all the stuff that they created, and a lot of it is like honestly something like the 1980s, early 1990s, and like these, which is a really big pivotal time for Nintendo. So we absolutely should be talking about those things. But I really truly believe that when we look back on Nintendo decades from now, we're going to look at these major inflection points, like the 1980s when they went all in on video gaming. That's going to be a significant one, and another significant one is going to be this Nintendo Switch era, and in particular, what they did with things like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and how much they opened up to letting players write their own experiences and things like that. And I think if we don't have Eiji Aonuma today as one of the giants, he absolutely will be when we look back later in his career.
Yeah, I really love that you said that because about Nintendo as a whole and how influential this generation has been. Because there's recency bias in saying, "Oh, this thing is the best ever," but there's recency bias the other way of too, of saying, "Nope, it's not as good as it was. It's not as important as it was." And I don't feel that way about right now. And I feel like I bang that drum all the time. Like we are living in a golden age of Nintendo right now, and
we're living in 1985 again. I think from a company important standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Like they're more relevant than they've ever been, and they're innovating more than they maybe ever have. And Aonuma is one of the people at the forefront of that. Whenever he shows up in a direct with that white screen behind him, wearing a Zelda shirt and a blazer, you're like, we're about to see something amazing. We're about to see something that we're going to think about for years and years to come. And it's just so cool. He's awesome, and I love that he's just someone who's been all in on Zelda for 25 years at this point. And a lot of creators, we see them, I want to do something new. When Aonuma wants to do something new, he just puts that into a Zelda game. And that's why the series has stayed so fresh and so cool. And Zelda is their best series to me. It just hands down is, from a quality standpoint, it's number one. And he has driven the bus the entire way. And so I
think Zelda is the North Star of the entire industry, and he is the architect of that. And I can't... I don't think it's unreasonable to think that he is like this generation's super creator, like somebody like Miyamoto from back in the day.
I agree. I think he is probably he's one of the best developers of all time, and he doesn't always get the same recognition because he doesn't run his own studio like Kojima does now. But if he did, we'd probably talk about him in the same way. Chris, what do you think?
No, I mean, to everything you guys just said, like, I do wonder if in hindsight he will become like the next Miyamoto, like, or talked about in the same way, right? Because like you almost wonder if he were on his own, would he be like a quote unquote video game rock star, like where it's like, oh my God, have you seen Onuma's new game? This is crazy. Like instead it's, the new Zelda game and he's the man behind, those decisions. No, I mean, he's wildly influential. I don't need to retread the same ground, but I love the man deeply.
Also, someone who's had a huge glow up. He is so stylish and cool looking.
He's so stylish. I know.
Yeah.
Like his hair is always looking great. He's got that salt and pepper.
He's one of the people that like when I have to go out, like I will do the blazer and t-shirt and like, it's kind of his fault for doing that.
I think he represents the most clear next element of that, like succession planning that we always talk about with the next generation. And you can see he is another person whose influence we will see and feel long after he retires, and we can already see those pieces being put into place now.
Yeah, and shout out to not Shintaro Furukawa, that's the president, Hidemaru Fujibayashi, who is directing these games alongside him right now. He's the Tezuka right now of The Legend of Zelda. Like we'll talk about him more in a few years when he's been around a little bit longer. But absolutely, Aonuma rules. If you listen to this show for 100 episodes, you know how much we adore Zelda. It's easily this show's number one series, and it's just reinvented the industry like 4 separate times. It's number one. Chris, you have one more to share with us here.
Satoshi Tajiri. He is the creator of Pokemon. So I did not know this until looking at our research here, but Game Freak originally started as a fan magazine for like the arcade game scene because he was super into that back in the 80s. And then the Game Boy was released with the link cable, or with the link cable for Tetris, and he was so inspired by like something needs to happen here, and I feel like it's kind of the genesis of this idea of like Nintendo needs to release new hardware with like a shtick, and then that will inspire new types of games because of that shtick, because of the success of Pokemon, like the idea of trading things back and forth. That is what led to the creation of that franchise. And now it's the largest franchise on the planet. I mean, there's, the rest is history there. And then just another fun fact, that Ash is named Satoshi in the Japanese Pokemon anime, and Gary is Shigeru.
I did not know that until I was looking.
I didn't know that either.
That is so crazy. And it is after him. It's not just a coincidence. It is after Miyamoto.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So cool that Gary Oak is Shigeru in Japan. I did not know that. Yeah, no, this is crazy. And the magazine that he made, Game Freak, before the company Game Freak, was illustrated by Ken Sugimori, who's the artist of the original Pokemon. Like, these two dudes just did a magazine together, and then they made Pokemon. Like, it's just insane. And now, like you said, it's the profit Pokemon made this year alone is equivalent to the profit Nintendo made in its best year ever this year. Like, it's just a juggernaut, and you can't tell the story of Nintendo without Pokemon.
Yeah.
Cool, and then I think we just have one more on the list, and then we're at the hour mark. So then we'll get into your fan responses, and then we'll get out of here. So, Justin, who's our last one here?
Yeah, our last one, Yoshio Sakamoto, started in 1982. So this is one of the people that was part of R&D 1. And that is a name, if you're a Nintendo fan, that you should have burned into your consciousness. Like, that is the team. That is the Avengers, basically, at the origin of the digital side of Nintendo. Working on both hardware, like the Game Boy, and so much of the most important software in the basically the history of the industry. So he was right there with Gunpei Yokoi working through all of these things. And so he's probably most closely associated with the Metroid franchise, directed Super Metroid, which, now Logan, I don't know if you've ever played Super Metroid.
Yeah.
It might be one of the very few perfect games. Like, perfect games. Absolutely incredible. All the way to, like, Metroid Dread, which just came out recently. He's WarioWare, Rhythm Heaven, Tamagotchi. This is another one where if you want to look at a like video gameography that spans 4 decades and has some of the most recognizable names across the entire industry, like literally Donkey Kong, Metroid,
Famicom Detective Club, Emio, the Smiling Man. Yeah, that's what he's working on now.
Picross.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's the closest we have to like Mr. Metroid, like how Aonuma is Mr. Zelda at this point, right? Like, he has had his hands in this series for a very long time. Got to produce Samus Returns and Dread after years away from 2D Metroid. Just very cool. And one cool fact I learned about him when researching for the show was that one of his major design philosophies is to do things the opposite of how Miyamoto would do them, just to make Nintendo games have like different identities across them. And that's so cool. Like, that's such a cool perspective for him to have. And Metroid is very different than the stuff Miyamoto makes. So that's awesome.
And honestly, like, frankly, not everybody could get away with that. But when you've been there, again, on the A team since day one, effectively, you can do that. Like, we talk about all these luminaries, like all these people who are like the giants in this. Like, these are his peers. Like, these are his coworkers. Like, he's been there every step of the way, and he is still producing, and he is still like taking the lead on projects. So while folks like the Miyamoto's like take a step back and sort of have more of a like overarching directorial role or move on to other projects, like no, like you want to play like his games, like cool, play Emio when it comes out.
Yeah. And yeah, Justin, you said you alluded to that I played Super Metroid last weekend, and oh my god, it's the first time I've played it all the way through in over a decade, and I had just maybe not really appreciated it when I was younger and played it 10 years ago. That's one of the greatest video games I've ever played in my life. It was so awesome, and it's the most boring take ever. Super Metroid's awesome, but yeah, it's insane how good that game is. It's the best.
It took us 100 episodes, but we finally declared Super Metroid good.
We did it.
Yeah, we did it. So that's everyone on our list, but that's not even everybody that we could highlight. Like, there's Kensuke Tanabe, who is still at Nintendo. He's been there since the 80s, and now he like works with Nintendo's second party. So like if Next Level makes something, or Metroid Prime 4, he's on the phone with them every day, helping them produce these video games. There's people like Reggie, who totally changed Nintendo of America for the better. We more focused on Nintendo NCL in Japan for this episode, but Reggie's influence was huge. And just like Iwata being a public face, Reggie was that for this side of the world. Absolutely. So there's so many more people. If we had to name the 4 giants like we pitched this segment, I guess I'm going Miyamoto, I'm going Yokoi, Yamauchi, and Iwata. I think those are the four, but it is tough to leave Aonuma off that list. It's tough to leave
That's
some
the
of these
hard
other
one.
guys off. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with your list completely, and I think that I think some of it is fame bias. Again, I think Takashi Tezuka is every bit as integral and important to their history as those other names that you mentioned, but it doesn't have the same recognition or cash-in, and so it's not as closely associated with some of these things. But again, that's one that I think you could easily swap out one of these names on there, and the list. And you have not compromised the integrity of that list. I think Aonuma, to me, my only pause on Aonuma is that he literally still just made two of the best games ever, like this generation. We're not even close to like his story being completed. And so it's like all right, like yeah you're in the Hall of Fame, but you also pitch this weekend. Like we don't need to like we don't need to like put your little plaque in Cooperstown just yet.
Yeah. Chris, do you agree with that four we laid out, or do you want to make any changes to it?
I do. I have no notes, honestly. Yeah.
My two big takeaways from this were, wow, everyone is still here, and that's insane. And we talked about that already. It's unbelievable what they've managed to do. And two, if we did this exercise again in 20, 25 years, I would hope and I would think that maybe there would be a woman on this list next time we do this. We see Nintendo, it's all men. We just talked about 12 men the entire time, but we're seeing far more women start to get hired at Nintendo. Every year they put out their fiscal report, they're saying, yeah, the percentage and the gender equality, it's going up. It's like, it's still very imbalanced. I think it's like 75 to 25 now, but it's significantly more than it once was. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we see like the first major like face of Nintendo as a woman happen sometime soon. I think that we could see, I don't know who it is, but I think that could happen. I think that's something that's important to them. They've said as much.
Yeah, and honestly, when we were talking about Koji Kondo, I was thinking to myself, like, if we expanded this list and like did another one like this, who else would be on there? And like Yoko Shimomura was a name that immediately came to mind. Yeah, who has a long legacy of some of the most memorable music the industry has ever seen. So I think that there's, like 20 years from now, I like. These people will be etched in stone, but like I would love to revisit this in the future and see how it's evolved over time.
Yeah, absolutely. That was super fun. That was really cool. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned something. Yeah, just some awesome people that you should know these names, and it doesn't end here. There's so much more to learn about these people. So we'll leave some links in the description. Go check it out. And yeah, it was super fun putting this together and just revisiting some of this history and learning some new stuff for the first time. Like Shigeru and being Gary in Pokemon, that blew my mind. Or Mario being named after the Nintendo of America landlord. I did not know that. That's crazy. Yeah. It's unbelievable. But we should move on. There was some news this week. We'll skip it. It was not that big. So we'll talk about it next week because I don't want to keep these guys too long. And I do want to get to EGAD's emails and the episode 100 voice submissions because a bunch of you did write in for episode 100. So let's celebrate the show a little bit here. You can email toadstoolboardroom@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter, ToadstoolBR, to submit your fan feedback. And this first one comes from Edwin, who asks a question for our 100th episode. What was the one game that sparked the biggest influence on your career trajectory? I always say Mario 64 ruined my life when I was a third grader after I couldn't see myself doing anything else in my life but making games. Justin, you want to go first?
Oh, boy. There's definitely a few. I would say if there is one that I would have to credit the most, it's actually probably Destiny. When I was first trying to establish my career as a writer in the industry, it's always really helpful to have like certain expertise, certain niches, things that you're really into. And as somebody who was like a really long time Halo player, I was really invested in Bungie and things that they made. And when Destiny came out, it's so big and complex and always updating. It's really tough to find people who were really expert about it. And so, the fact that I had that expertise and could write at least a little bit really kept me employed as somebody writing guides especially. And so I would not be doing this if not for that. Although, if you want to go way back, like way, way, way back, I have a day job where I work in the live event industry. It's all basically based around like audio and video, sound, like all these sorts of things. And the reason I got into that was because I had a retail career in that. The reason why I got into that was because I wanted to have the best possible sound system and video system for playing The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. And so that's how I ended up. And that started my entire like regular day job career.
That's awesome. That's super cool. Yeah, just the weird little random things you can trace things back to are always really cool. Chris, how about you? Do you have a pick for this?
Do I have? So there's two. The Dreamcast, they both are around piracy. So the Dreamcast was like wildly easy to pirate games for, and learning how to burn a disc like
ever.
It is
a
the most
bootloader.
Chris answer.
Yep. And just
already
burning
so
my own
extra.
CDRs and playing like burnt copies of Crazy Taxi and Dead or Alive too. But then also learning the hacking process of hacking a Wii, like early in the days of like the Wii's life cycle, and like how to copy over those game files and like what different like CIOS files were and meant, and how you could like patch the OS to make certain games run with like certain settings. I spent so much time doing that, like as a maybe 13 when that came out, 14. Like that directly impacted me being like, I like messing with computers and doing this kind of stuff.
That's cool.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Yeah. For me, it's the games that the game I think inspired me to get into writing about games was probably Earthbound, and that all traces back to everything traces back to me for me in this industry, which is Nintendo Voice Chat, just guaranteed. The first episode I ever listened to was a retrospective they did on Earthbound, and it was just randomly promoted on the homepage on IGN. It was Jose Otero's first episode he ever hosted, so they gave it some promotion. I clicked on it, I listened to it, and I was like, I got to play this game. I downloaded it on Wii U and I played it and I loved it. It was my favorite RPG for a very, very long time. And from that moment forward, I just listened to NVC every week. And here we are. I fast forward 11 years and now here we are doing this. And as for like another one kind of deeper into my career, it's got to be Tears of the Kingdom. It was the first game I pitched to write about as a freelancer to the features inbox at IGN. Lucy O'Brien, who's at Ubisoft now, I pitched a feature about Breath of the Wild 2 at the time, and basically it was Breath of the Wild 2 can't rest on its laurels. And I said they can't just do the same thing again. And I actually predicted a lot of what they ended up doing in Tears of the Kingdom, like just not to the extent obvious of what they did, but like a dark world, more enemy variety, these things. And yeah, and then that was the first game I wrote about, and then fast forward 4 years, and it was the first game I got to vote for Game of the Year at IGN as a staff member. So that just kind of like was my freelance career in a circle. So I love that game for that reason and for 2,000 other reasons that I've talked about on the show every week. But yeah, Tears of the Kingdom is a special one. So thanks, Edwin, for that question. We don't have any more questions, but we have a ton of nice messages you wrote in for the show. So let's go through them now. This first one comes from Tyler, who said, just wanted to write in to congratulate you guys on 100 episodes. Thank you, Tyler. It's one of the highlights of my week each week to sit down and listen to the show. I enjoy all the conversations, topics, opinions, and the occasional hot takes. Keep up the great work and hope there's 100 plus more episodes to come. Okay, that's all the time I've got. I got to get back to playing Animal Crossing New Leaf on my Nintendo 3DS. Thank you, Tyler, for using the sign-off. I love it. It's becoming a thing. Yeah, we love making the show, so thanks so much for writing in. This next one comes from Buck, who says, didn't have a chance to record a message, but I wanted to say thanks for being such a great Nintendo-focused podcast. I love hearing everyone's perspectives, and I appreciate that y'all put in so much homework to make for an engaging and useful listen. From basic stuff like actually knowing release dates to nerdy stuff like trying to predict Nintendo's development roadmap based on what dev studios we've last heard from. Chris, I wanted to specifically thank you for representing the dad gamer perspective without falling into the cynical, grumpy old guy trope that too much a gaming journalist my age tend to take on. In fact, the vibes of the show in general are always positive and non-judgmental. My kids and I love to listen every week. Now I've got to get back to playing Animal Crossing New Leaf on my Nintendo 3DS. Chris, yeah, a couple people shouted out that you as a busy new dad have brought a nice perspective to the show.
Oh, that legitimately really warms my heart, because like full disclosure to our listeners, like there have been many conversations between me and Logan, depending upon the week that I'm having, where I'm like, I don't know if I can do this anymore, guys. Like I don't have enough time, and there's too much stuff to do around the house. And he's like, no, just give it another week. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, you can do it. I believe. You don't have to play anything. Just come out and show up for an hour.
There's a little bit of like the imposter syndrome of like, these guys are going to figure me out. Like I can only play like a game. I haven't touched NES Championship Edition, and the cartridge is behind me. Like I haven't touched it since the day it came out. I love the game. I just haven't had time to play it. But no, that makes me feel a lot better that you guys do appreciate that perspective. So thank you.
We're all Shrive sickos at heart.
It's true. Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, I think that just how honest you are about it. You're not pretending like you're playing all these games for hours. You're giving the real perspective. And yeah, I think people appreciate that. This next one comes from Neko from our Discord server, who said, trapped at work, so can't really record something without a bunch of audio garbage. Well, that's okay. Thanks for writing in. But I at least wanted to thank and congratulate you all for this podcast and giving me something to get through work a bit faster. I appreciate all the insightful conversations about Nintendo and the gaming industry as a whole. Here's to 100 more. And then Neko has a question, but we're going to save that question for next week because it's a really long, in-depth discussion that we'll get to about the next generation of Nintendo. So I've bookmarked it. We'll talk about it next week. And now we're going to take a really quick break to set up some hardware stuff. And when we come back, we're going to listen to some of your voice submissions that you sent in for episode 100. So we'll be right back here on episode 100 of the Toadstool Boardroom. Ready whenever? We're back on episode 100 of the Toadstool Boardroom, and we're going to listen to your voice messages. We've been calling out the last couple weeks that you can submit a 60-second audio message for us to listen to on episode 100, and 7 of you did so. So we're going to go through these here. And Justin, you've got the first one queued up.
I really enjoy how much fun you guys have with the podcast and the diverse array of topics you guys talk about in terms of Nintendo, and you can get into very intense, passionate disagreements about your stances on various decisions Nintendo has made, but you never let those disagreements ruin the positive aura that your guys' show has. It's just always a good time, but that diverse array of opinions still makes the show, I guess, intellectual and interesting to think about with the diverse array of opinions that are showcased.
Yeah, thanks so much. That warms my heart to hear, because that's like literally my goal for this show. And it was when we set out to start it, was like make something where we can disagree with each other and it's not something that's taken personally. And I think that like sometimes people tend to like get their feelings hurt when someone disagrees with them. It's like, no, when we come in here, we're going to share our different opinions. Sometimes it'll get heated like our Nintendo Direct episode, but then we'll walk away at the end of the episode and it's like, yeah, that was great. That's the goal, is to get those types of discussions. So yeah, I really love that that's coming across to you. Thanks for setting that in.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we be genuine, and you can't genuinely talk to people a lot and always agree about everything, especially if it's stuff that you're really passionate about. And the fact that we can disagree and we can frankly get into the weeds a little bit, I think is a big part of what makes this show fun.
Yeah.
Are you ready for the next one?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Let's roll it.
Hi, Toadstool Boardroom. I'm a longtime listener, and my favorite moments are listening to Logan, Justin, and Chris argue while ranking their favorite Nintendo games. I'm looking forward to many more rankings in the future.
People like it when we disagree.
Yes, they do.
Yeah,
That's what we're
apparently.
learning. Yeah, we've had some good rankings. The top 15 Nintendo games of all time, in particular, I remember. We got pretty heated on that one. That was a fun one. We should do more. We got more consoles to rank. We got more stuff to tackle.
There's so many things we
The
can
Virtual Boy, let's go.
The
Top 5 Yoshi colors, go.
Black,
Team Yellow,
green, orange. Okay. What's our next clip, Justin?
Hey there, Toadstool Boardroom. This is Squidkel from the Discord. I love the show. I love the community. I like listening to guys that come from 3 different generations of Nintendo fans and are in different places in their lives, so they have different amount of time to dedicate to the hobby.
Shout out, Chris.
You guys have a wide variety of tastes and different opinions, and that makes it interesting every week. Thanks, and keep up the great work.
Thanks so much, Squid Kel, and thanks for being in the Discord. Yeah, it's a really fun community. If you're listening to the show and you're not in there yet, you should come and join. There's a link in every single episode we post. But I think that was something I was really excited about when we brought Justin on. You're just going to accuse me of calling you old. That's not my point here.
100%.
But just having somebody who grew up with a Super Nintendo, and then having me who grew up like with the GameCube, and then Chris in the middle of us, I think it's nice that we cover all the bases, and we love, at least one of us loves every era, so we can talk about everything, and I think that's been really good.
Yeah, I think it makes for a really fun dynamic, and it is funny because it does a good job exposing our biases for what we grew up with and how that can affect how we feel about certain things. And if I'm the show's version of the old lady from Titanic, I'm fine with that.
But then I play Super Metroid, which came out 30 years ago, and I loved it. It's so good. All eras are good, except maybe the Virtual Boy. All right, what's next?
Ooh.
Hey, this is Chad T. I've been a consistent
Chad.
listener to the Toadstool Boardroom for over a year, and I look forward to the show every week. I like a lot of things about the show, including how the conversations are good-natured, educational, and entertaining, and I think that each member of the boardroom contributes a unique perspective. Listening to the show and chatting in Discord makes me feel more connected to fellow Nintendo fans around the world, and it also helps me tap into something that has given me joy ever since I was a child. Congratulations to the boardroom for reaching 100 episodes, and I hope there will be many more episodes to come, as well as opportunities for the community to connect.
Yeah, like
That was
3DS game
lovely.
night. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
Thanks, Chad. That was really nice. Chris, yeah, your idea to make the Discord into something bigger, which I didn't really use for anything after Toadstool FC died within the first 2 weeks of that game, was such a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely want to expand on it as much as I can. Obviously everybody knows I have limited time, but the game nights, the self generated game nights that people will tend to do or are starting to do, I think is really cool. And then just the news that people find that like drop that I probably wouldn't see otherwise every now and then it keeps things really exciting. Like I didn't open Discord as much throughout the day, and like now I find myself like once an hour I'll be like, did anybody drop anything in the Toadstool
Yeah,
Discord?
right.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, it's really fun. All right, we got 2 more, Justin. What's next?
All right.
Hey, Toadstool Boardroom. This is Blee. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Just wanted to say congratulations on your first 100 episodes. I've listened to every episode so far. Can't wait to listen to 100 more. And a stool, much like a toadstool, a stool needs 3 legs to stand. And Logan, Chris, and Justin, I think each of you are a very solid leg to this toadstool. But for real, I love the show. A lot of podcasts, I feel like there's a lot of talking, a lot of other podcasts. There's a lot of talking, but no real substance. But that's not the case with the Toadstool Boardroom. You guys have so much love for Nintendo and so much good insight to bring to the conversation. Love it. Keep up the good work. And I don't know, we don't have a slogan. Boardroom on?
Boardroom on! That's great. Thanks, Blee. Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you, Johnny Storm.
Amazing.
Flame on!
Absolutely
We do love
spectacular.
Nintendo just a little bit, don't we? Yeah.
A little bit.
We do.
It's like
Yeah.
the highlight of my week is talking about Nintendo with you guys. It's so much fun.
I enjoyed a lot, and I will say, like, that is the beauty, I think, of the community, is that, like, it's not just when we're, like, on the podcast. Like, we have the exact same conversations there, and a lot of times, like, folks there will have the conversations with us, without us, around us. And it's a really cool thing when, like, a really interesting news item is dropped in there, and it's, like, a member of the community who unearthed it first and did that. And I personally take a lot of pleasure that I can elicit the same collective groan out of everybody there as I do for you two here.
Yeah, Justin's ability to drop a dad joke like immediately. It's like a muscle I just need to learn how to flex.
Typing and you're in.
Oh God, what is he gonna say?
It's about to happen.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
All right, we got one more to listen to. What do we got, Justin?
Congratulations, guys, on the big 100. I'm glad I got to see it. Even though I was only part of the boardroom for a short amount of time, I'm happy to be part of the legacy. And life comes at you fast. Who would have thought we would have grew so fast? The channel would have grew so fast. You guys would have accomplished so much. Cheers, and here's to another 100 episodes.
Odell! That was Odell. Thank you so much, Odell, for sending that in. One of the founding chairmen of the boardroom.
Board
He was with
member
us for
emeritus.
like 7 months, I think, before PlayStation scooped him up. They were listening to this show and like, we need that guy, and they swooped down and plucked him. Yeah. Yeah, I still miss that guy, but I think the four of us on the show would be too powerful. It would
That's
just
true.
be too much.
We tried to play Mario Party once, and the servers couldn't handle it. I literally got choked up listening to that. I miss Odell so much.
Love you, Odell.
Love you, Odell.
Yeah, he was. So I wanted to bring this up. Actually, Justin, I do think we skipped one fan one. There should be one more in there. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 5, I think.
Let's see.
Because we have one from Tim.
Oh, you're right.
You skipped Tim?
Well, Tim, we'll come back to you at episode 200.
Oh, no, in 2 years.
Hello, Boardroom. Congratulations on episode 100. This is Tim, or Red Tea House in the Discord. And I just wanted to say, guys, thank you for everything that you brought into my drives home from work, my time just doing the dishes at night and waiting for the kids to fall asleep. I truly think that you guys are the example of how gaming discourse should be taking place. And yeah, looking forward to the next 100. My dad of 3 brain is in shambles, so remembering a specific episode or moment there is a bit difficult for me to do. But I do really appreciate the community that you guys have fostered in the Discord. My favorite moment from there probably being like the weeks leading up to the 3DS online closing and being up to play Smash, Mario Kart 7, and of course, the King, Kid Icarus Uprising.
Okay.
Again, looking forward to more community events and what the next 100 shows have in store. Hashtag justice for Donkey Kong Country 2.
Nice.
Did not make our list, and yeah, Tim really wanted it too. Thanks so much, Tim. That is so kind. That you said for the example of gaming discourse how it should be. That's extremely nice, and we really appreciate it. Yeah, so thanks. Those messages were so nice. We have such an awesome community that I'm really, really happy with and proud of. And I just wanted to pull up one more thing here before we go. And this is after the Odell conversation. Odell was the first person I reached out to start the show on November 24th of 2021. So coming up on 3 years ago. It took about 6 months to get off the ground after that. And this is what I said to Odell after we talked for a little bit. And I said, I want to make a really high quality discussion-based Nintendo podcast. I think that I want a show where we don't just talk about games, but the business philosophy and impact behind Nintendo's decisions. I want us to all have an understanding of Nintendo's history and current standing as a company and have a really rich discussion. And I feel like that's what we do here. And I'm just really proud that a couple years later that vision's been executed. And I think you two you're the perfect co-host to have on this show. And I'm so appreciative of you guys for doing the show with me every week.
I am so appreciative of the invite to be here and to be a part of this. I think what we do here, we're extremely lucky because of the fact that anybody will take the time to listen to us is incredible. And getting to know our community more through things like the Discord, through social interactions, things like that, it's been so rewarding.
There's a good chance I may start crying through this. So, no, I mean, when I started, I was still doing social at IGN. I was just in a very different place in life. And, I really appreciate you guys letting me stick with it or making me stick with it. I don't know which one it actually is.
It's not letting. I know. It's neither, but yeah. On.
No, I know. But I appreciate the fact that you did reach out after being on my previous podcast and asked me to do this with you because I was ready to just be done and just be a normal person that just consumed content at that point. And I like doing this too much and I didn't know who to do it with. And when Odell left, I was heartbroken because Odell's my man. And then Justin came along and I was super nice guy. I don't know him that well. And dude, you just nailed it. You absolutely, I remember the first episode that we were on together. I was super intimidated at just at that moment it still happens because of just how well spoken you are. and your breadth of knowledge. I expect that from Logan. Like he's that put together. But like when you came on, I was like, I'm not cut out for this. You know, and I respect the hell out of both of you guys. I love doing the show. I love you both.
The feeling is incredibly mutual, Chris.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love you too, man. You're so good at this. You had you're home to the funniest moment in boardroom history, which is our discussion of the solid gold Nintendo Wii from a few weeks back. If you missed that, go check that one out. But no, you guys rule, and no, this is literally the show I always wanted to make. It just is. And I've done so many podcasts over the years and radio shows in college, and I always just had this vision of like, I want to make the show I grew up listening to, like the NVC I grew up listening to that inspired me to embark on this journey. And we are making it right now. And I'm so proud of it every week. And every week I leave and I'm like, we nailed it. That was such a great show. I go out and I tell my girlfriend, yeah, awesome show this week. And it is every week. And I'm so grateful and happy for you guys and what we have here. So it's awesome. Let's do 100 more. And then 100 more after that. Let's keep it going.
Sure.
Yeah. But for now, that is another episode of the Toadstool Boardroom. In the books, a long episode. Thanks, guys, for sticking around. We're a weekly Nintendo show here Thursdays, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern on video version on YouTube, audio on Apple Podcast and Spotify, and wherever else you like to listen to your show. Follow us on Twitter at ToadstoolBR. Email us, toadstoolboardroom@gmail.com. Hop into the Toadstool Boardroom Discord server. And hopefully in the description, we'll have a bunch of links, too, from this episode, so you can go learn more about all the awesome people that we talked about. It was super fun. Justin, where can people find you, and what do you want to plug?
Ooh, find me on Twitter at KOREIS. Oh boy, I just did some guides for college football. If you want to like some really granular, actually like how to read defenses, check out my college football 25 guides on IGN.com. Nice. It was kind of cool to like be able to like get really deep into reading coverages and stuff like that. Otherwise, I'm working on a review right now. That'll be out in a couple of weeks. I did my Tenno-Con pieces are mostly out. I got a chance to interview Ben Starr, who is hilarious. Awesome. So that's out. So yeah, just go to Twitter.
Chris, where can people find you?
You can find me at Try93 all over the internet. If you want to see pictures of me and my adorable child, you can follow me on Instagram because that's all I really post on there anymore. I'm going on vacation next week. I will not be on the show with these fine fellows. But if you have any recommendations for what you think I should revisit or replay or play for the first time on Nintendo Switch or on the Steam Deck, please let me know because I will be trying to do that as much as possible after the little guy goes to bed because it's vacation and I have no other responsibilities.
How about Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door?
Oh, I should get back to that. That's actually a really good call. Yeah, that might be what happens.
You can find me on Twitter at Logan J. Plant. Right now, I'm live tweeting my conversion into a Metroid superfan. I am like totally falling hard for this series, harder than I ever have. And finally, I love it. I love it so much. I'm gonna boot up the Wii to play Prime 2 and Prime 3. That's how dedicated I am right now. Yeah, I am so into it. So yeah, you can follow me there. But for now, that's all the time I've got. I got to get back to playing Animal Crossing New Leaf on my Nintendo 3DS. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great week, and we'll catch you next time right here in the Toadstool Boardroom.
Boardroom on!